Good day, everyone. So Nilou has a hidden sort of superpower, and this is the fact that she can apply hydro on demand, no matter how she sort of runs across the field and so on. And it might not sound like much, but we're going to go through a couple of examples, and you'll hopefully get the point that I'm trying to make. But the bigger theme for this video is to sort of show you how the kit of Nilou is suited to generating dendro cores, not just necessarily bountiful cores, but dendro cores. And you'll also see me later in the video showing you an example of playing her in a Hyperbloom team with very, very good comparable results to, let's say, Kokomi and Xingshu. And I think this is one of the things a lot of people kind of miss about Nilou. It's not her passive that is sort of for me, the highlights of her kit. The only thing her passive does is it just says like Bloom-only teams can now do more damage, whereas in a Hyperbloom team, you just have an Electro unit that sort of ups the multiplier. So for me, what Nilou's hidden power is the fact that she is good at generating these dendro cores. So let's sort of see how this works. Basically, in the background, you can see me sort of tagging Masanori here. You'll see the moment we apply Hydro, it's sort of going to come on screen. And there we go. So the moment that little bar is there, it applies the hydro. Do note the time here, and you'll also see that I've sort of noted the time, and you'll more or less see that the moment we apply the wet status, I'm going to switch to Traveler, you'll see the bloom reaction, and obviously it's going to go away. So obviously Dendro consumes like the hydro aura, and well, there's like no aura left on Masanori, and you'll see right at this instance we now have another hydro application from Nilou herself at about 11.498. This means it is about 2 seconds in which Nilou sort of applies this hydro. You can also confirm this yourselves by going into the overworld and looking at those like little dendro mushrooms. There's like certain mushrooms that if you hit them, they're like just like explode or like exude a lot of dendro. You can stand there with Nilou, and every about 2 seconds you'll see she just applies and she just generates like another little core. So we know this as a sort of matter of fact. And we also note that the other two characters in the game that has this ability to run around, and the moment they like collide with enemies, they can apply Hydro, are like Barbara and Xingshu, and these are more or less their times. It should be about 3 seconds, maybe this because of ping on Barbara, and 2.5 seconds on Xingshu. Of course, I have confirmed this. I'm not really sort of going to go over it, but I'm just going to quickly play it here in the background, and you guys can also sort of see it. Do note the different times. You can see here, definitely taking quite a bit longer on Barbara, and of course here is Xingshu. We applied the wet status, obviously the bloom, it goes away, and pretty much right there we still get now the new hydro application with Xingshu's rain sword. So these results are readily available that you can confirm. They sort of confirm to what we have here from Kaching main, so I do think that everything here is pretty much verifiable and true. Now let's sort of understand what some of the practical implications are when looking at the Abyss. So we are right here, and as you can see, I'm quickly just going to use Nilou and Traveler and whatever on the other floor. So what we're going to try and do is just sort of see exactly how this mechanic of Nilou works in practice. And it's so important because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand this. And as you can see here, we can, the moment we hit an enemy, we just tag them with kind of Hydro. This is what's so good about Nilou. It's not a ticking jellyfish that sort of periodically ticks. It's not something that depends on you triggering, let's say, a normal attack and so on. It is something that just happens the moment you touch an enemy, and obviously there's an internal cooldown of 2 seconds before you can reapply the hydro to the same enemy. And I think this is just like what's so cool about Nilou. You can see despite the fact that these enemies are spread out, I'm just literally running around just tagging them with hydro, and that's sort of how I'm getting my hydro on the field. You can see it, the first wave is pretty much cleared, and I just had 2 characters that did it, so it's kind of cool. Now here's a little something that not a lot of people know about Xingshu. So you'll see here my rain swords, and obviously I'm not going to hit an enemy, I'm going to apply a hydro, but look at that. Despite the fact that we hit one enemy, we did not apply Hydro immediately onto all of the other enemies, even though we hugged them. So let's just see here, and as you can see here, nope, there's no Hydro, and finally there's the Hydro after about 2.5 seconds. This is the thing about Shu. He actually shares an internal cooldown with his burst when it comes to tagging enemies, so you can't run around like him, like Nilou and Barbara, and tag enemies. And of course, Barbara's got like a 3-second cooldown, so she's not as well suited to creating like dendro cores and stuff. And I think this is the big thing that a lot of people don't really understand. When you look at this off-field, or this like running around like a Hydra application, it is just so good, and this means that Nilou herself is well poised for teams like the Hyperbloom teams. In the background you can obviously see what happens when I use Kokomi, and it works pretty well. So what will happen if we now use, let's say, Nilou instead? Well, obviously there's a very nice synergy between Nilou and Cookie, because both of them have a ring that runs around with the active character. So as long as you've got a big field of Dendro that hits the enemies, you can run around with Cookie and Nilou and trigger lots of Hyper Bloom. This is pretty cool, and in this case Cookie is the one that's contributing to the damage via the triggering like Hyper Blooms, whereas in Nilou's like niche team, she's the one doing the damage. And I think this is another big thing that people kind of miss. Even though in Nilou's niche she's like really good, outside of that it doesn't matter, because there are other characters that can also like trigger it. And as you can see here, it was like done like pretty well. Yeah, you can see me just sort of running Xingshu, and you'll sort of note the differences as well. I think this is where Sucrose herself is kind of useful, because she can obviously help swirl the Hydro and stuff, so there are more enemies that can be tagged, or you can infuse Sucrose's elemental burst and so on, and that just means you can trigger more of these reactions. So you don't then necessarily need someone to hug things around. But as I've shown, like with Nilou, the fact that you can still run around and get enemies in an AoE makes it like so good. And it's not like these times are not really comparable. Obviously there's a bit of shenanigans with the enemy AI and how you position and all of these sorts of things, but when it comes to Hyper Bloom teams, is Nilou really that bad? Does any of the results that you guys have seen indicate to you that, oh my god, you know, she's only restricted to her own special Bloom team? Well, no. She's very good at applying Hydro. And this is the key thing that a lot of people seem to miss out on. This is what is, I would call, like her superpower and stuff. Obviously, there are certain implications of this, so if you want to try and use her in a vaporized team, you can obviously do so, but that's more that ties in more to her other E ability and her like Q ability. You can obviously try and use her for freeze, but of course the AoE is not always that wide, so in that case you definitely want an Anima unit to group up the enemies very closely, and once they're all grouped up you can just then have a very long time freeze. Obviously by the time your Ayaka hits her elemental burst, you can then swap over to Nilou, use her elemental burst to apply again another additional instance of the Hydro, and so on, and before Nilou's cooldowns reset. And in that case, you're in any case then waiting again for your Ayaka and the rest of your teammates' cooldowns to come on. So it's not the end of the world. It's functional. Nilou herself provides more than just her niche, and I wish people would wake up to that fact, because it certainly is clear as day to me, practically, theoretically, but I don't know why people like refuse to acknowledge it. It's just so weird.